Yeah,
We
I know it
Juan,
was.
we have Juan in Colombia who evidently would like to know what beliefs we hold that cannot be proven. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Do you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we hear you. I just want to make sure that was inaccurate with the.
Yeah. Maybe I can explain a little bit more.
Sure.
What I am referring in that question is about the axioms you have in your life. Are you familiar with the axiom definition?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I am just curious about if you have any axioms in your life, and what is your justification for having them?
Well, if you ask what beliefs we hold that can't be proven, then there are things that we hold without justification. So it'd be kind of silly to ask what the justification is. For example, I believe that I'm sharing a universe with you and Vern, or with you and Jim and Vern and everybody else. I can't prove it because there's no solution to the problem of hard solipsism that I'm aware of. I think I have good reason for this internally, but that is contingent on reason being reasonable, which I also can't demonstrate. So I begin with, I am in fact sharing a universe, and that the laws of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle are true and absolute. I can't prove that. Everything else, as far as I can tell, is derived directly from those positions.
Okay, when I was referring to the justification, I maybe meant, for example, in mathematics, the axioms are constructed in a way that they are incredibly basic. At first glance, they are really simple, but they construct a whole world of mathematics.
Right.
So maybe
that's why I went with
justification would be the actions must be really simple.
I think that's what I've done is I specifically I have those two foundational, you can call them axioms, you can call them presuppositions, however you like, but that is the simple foundation from which everything else is derived about all my positions.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons I ask this is because when talking to religious people here in my country, the axioms they use is God exists, and I'm really having a difficult time trying to explain to them that maybe that's not a good axiom to have.
Yeah, it's that's something that could be a conclusion based on evidence, not something you assume. If you begin with the assumption that God exists, it's like, well, okay, we're done. Why have a conversation about that if you're just going to assume that it's true? If instead you think that God is a conclusion that you've reached from axioms, like if I have, I'm going to assume, Juan, that you believe you're sharing a universe with me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm also going to assume that you accept the foundations of logic, like identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle.
Yes, correct. Yes.
And I would bet that any position that we could both reach would be derived from those assumptions. And that if I were to say, oh, I'm also going to get to assume this other thing, your response would be the same as you are with religious people of saying, hang on a second, I don't necessarily accept that as that axiom. How could we, what's the reason to accept that? Because my reason for accepting that I share a reality is because all of the evidence points to that. I just can't demonstrate the reliability of reason.
Yes, I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if I have time, I would like to ask you one more question about an argument I was given about the ontology of good and evil.
The ontology of good and evil. Okay.
Yes, a religious person said to me that because good is ontologically truth, I mean valid, there must be a God. Truth exists without is independent of anything else. Yes.
So I apologize. I'm having a little bit of difficulty of following because, first of all, when we talk about the ontology of good and evil, ontology deals with the nature of what something is. And I don't think that good is something that is. So I don't think it has a true ontology. It would be like talking about the ontology of
exactly. The person said to me that good is exists, and evil does not exist. And I mean, putting that there, my view is that the argument is wrong because how can, for example, good does depend on something. It depends on which entity applies that good, because if there isn't any entity to do a good action, there doesn't exist.
If there's not some thinking entity that can evaluate it and reach the opinion or assessment that it's good, then good doesn't exist. Yes, I'm in agreement with you.
Thank you for agreeing with me. I'm just trying to look any flaws in my counter arguments.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much difficult this is, because congrats to you for at least speaking a couple different languages, because I just know the one. And when we get into some of these philosophical arguments, the differences in verbiage is so subtle within one language that I'm very cautious about when we start crossing linguistic borders here. And so for me, it is human beings that evaluate the consequences of actions to determine whether they are good or bad with respect to some goal. And that goal can be arbitrary, subjective, whatever. But that doesn't mean that there's good doesn't exist as a thing. It is it's an abstraction. And so I would argue that it doesn't have an ontology. And to whatever extent we could have a metaphorical ontology, then the ontology in that metaphorical sense would be, I think this is good, or I have concluded this is good based on what I want, or my preference about what kind of world we're in. But if they're just going with good is true, which I think you said something along those lines a minute ago, where they said that something is good if it's true. But if I were to say it's true that I'm currently dying of cancer, that isn't anything that I would evaluate as good. By the way, it's not true, as far as I know. I'm just saying that good and truth are not equal. There are bad things that are in fact true. There are true things that happen that we would evaluate as bad.
Yes. Maybe it was my mistake for confusing those terms. Yes.
Probably not. You probably. I mean, you were trying to relay a conversation and translate it for me. So I'm going to give you all the benefit.
Can I would like to add one more thing before I leave. I am noticing just now that in the YouTube video it says Colombia with an U and it's with an O.
Yes, we've been discussing that. I have about 4 or 5 messages in the ACA mod chat. Everybody spotted that error, and I apologize for the typo. It's too late to. Yeah, I figured out that you were from Colombia.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm just trying to spread the correct spelling.
Yep.
Oh, we appreciate that, and apologize there.
Yeah, I'm going to let you go, Juan, but I'm going to explain what actually happens here and why it's potentially worse.